If you all are here for the economic market update from our chief economist from Virginia Association of Realtors, you are in the right place. If not, you still want to stay because it's going to be some awesome information. So I have the pleasure today of introducing our guest speaker, Mr. Ryan Price. Over the last 15 years, Ryan has honed his knowledge of Virginia's economy and housing market in a variety of roles in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Ryan's research focuses on housing market trends in Virginia and the economic and demographic factors that move the market. Ryan is the chief economist for Virginia Realtors, Virginia's largest trade association. Prior to joining Virginia Realtors, he served as the president of research consulting firm LSA Planning, as a planner for the city of Alexandria, as a researcher at the Center for Regional Analysis at George Mason University, and as financial analyst at Freddie Mac, among other roles. Ryan received his master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Virginia. I'm joking, Virginia Tech. I had to give him a hard time because I'm a Wahoo. But his master's degree from Virginia Tech and a bachelor's degree in finance from James Madison. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ryan to the stage.
Good afternoon. I know we got happy hour coming. Right after this, so the idea is to throw a bunch of data, throw a bunch of stats at you, get you really, real thirsty for a nice happy hour. We got a lot to talk about today. I'm Ryan. Thank you guys for inviting me to the summit. We have, there's been a lot of talk about soft landing out in the economy, a little more chatter about that. We've seen our interest rates get cut just last week. So we're going to peel back the layers on a few things. The economy, how that's going. The job market is directly related to that. We're going to take a look at some demographic trends here in Virginia, some interesting trends that have been occurring over the past few years. And then we're going to wrap it up with a deep dive into Virginia's housing market. Now, and then I'd be remiss to say I also brought something with me. I brought my crystal ball with me. So we're going to look at the outlook on how we see things shaking out in the rest of this year and then through 2025. So the presentation is structured so that we've identified several key trends that really I think are driving a lot of what we're seeing in the market and where we see things going. Is this working? Yep. So the first key trend that we're going to walk through here and unpack is that our economy is still growing. We have data that suggests it's growing at a relatively good, solid rate. A lot of this is driven by consumer spending, which we're going to talk about. At the same time, though, we have inflation falling. So we have our economy growing, we have inflation falling, and we have some early signs that the job market, the labor market, is starting to cool down. So all these things are happening simultaneously, which is why the Federal Reserve cut the rate last week, 0.5 percentage point. And there's definitely some more rates that are on the table, rate cuts, in the coming months and well into next year, through next year. So how do we know the economy is still growing? By looking at our GDP, our gross domestic product, which includes everything in the economy. Consumer spending, biggest part, about 70%, is you and I going out to Target, going for 5 things, leaving with 15, going on Amazon. Us spending our money in the economy is the biggest driver of economic activity. This includes government spending, also a very big component. Federal, state, local. This includes imports and exports, business investment. And other than a little dip here in 2022, we've actually seen the economy grow consistently over the past couple years, even with the most aggressive federal funds rate hikes that we've seen since the early 1980s. It's a little unusual. When we see those rate hikes go up, those rates go up, typically we would see the GDP cool off a bit. Hasn't been the case. Just this past quarter, 3% growth in the GDP. It's projected to maybe slow down a little bit here in the fall, but really not fall, not go below that 0%. And if you get it dipped below zero too many quarters in a row, that indicates a recession. So we're not projecting a recession, even with these interest rates. So why is that? Why is that happening? What's different this time around? And it's really that consumer spending. And we're going to talk through why it's been different this time around on the next slide. But consumer spending has driven our economy over the past couple years. Our government's been spending. We all know that. Federal, state, and local have ramped up their spending. A little bit of a downturn in residential construction in Q2 here. Likely to see that pick back up, but that probably kept the GDP a little bit lower than it otherwise would have been. So what is driving that consumer spending? Because we know that 70% of the entire economy is consumer spending. I forgot this slide's in there. Virginia, how are we doing in Virginia? 2.1% growth of our economy. So we're similar trajectory as the U.S. as a whole. We have a lot of similarities with the overall structure of the U.S. economy here in Virginia. Now, consumer spending. Let's talk about this for a minute. So when we look at our disposable income, disposable income, anything below this line here, all of this is our disposable income, about 16, give or take, trillion dollars. Anything that is hashed represents our spending of that disposable income. So the gap between the top here and where this hash starts has slowly gotten a little smaller as we've progressed. But what I want to point out to you is some unusual activity that occurred right here. We got a big trough in our spending. This is COVID. This is really at the beginning of COVID. We stayed at home. We didn't spend our money. We didn't spend that disposable income. So we saved. Our savings rate went through the roof. But look what else happened. See these spikes? These little mountains right here. This is government stimulus money. So we were saving more and receiving more at the same time over the same year or so, a couple of years. And that is really what has fueled and what has propelled our consumer spending and why the economy continues to grow even with the pullback in those interest rates or increase in those interest rates. Our savings rate has steadily declined in the U.S. This is something to be concerned about, particularly when we talk about home ownership. Before 2020, we were, anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe 9% savings rate, personal savings rate in the U.S. on a good year, 9%. We're dwindling, around 4, 3%, 3.5%. So our savings has gone down dramatically while our spending has continued. So what that tells us is that eventually that spending is going to slow down. Eventually. We don't know when, but credit card debts are going up. Delinquencies are starting to go up on that debt. But what this suggests is that over time, the economy, the heat in the economy is going to cool off as the consumers eventually start to pull back. So we talked about consumer spending driving the economy, and inflation has been falling. Inflation, the most recent reading that we have is 2.5%, and that means all the goods and services that we have in the economy cost about 2.5% more than they did a year ago. Now, we have improved quite a bit from our peak of about 9.1% here in 2022. This black line represents the top line inflation. This blue line, a little more accurate read because it takes out the volatile items like food and energy. But really, to me, the takeaway is that because the Fed cut the rate, even though we're not quite at the target's 2%, they cut the rate even though we're not there because they're confident that we're heading there, that we're on the right path to getting inflation under control. Because the Federal Reserve has two specific mandates that they focus their policy efforts on. One is keeping inflation under control, which it has definitely improved. And the second is keeping maximum employment, maximum labor market. And that's really where the fear is right now, is that if they hold these rates up too long, we might start to see the labor market get worse. We might start seeing layoffs. And so they are starting their cuts now in an effort to get in front of that and sort of have the labor market not go into the negative. How is the labor market doing? I should mention this before we move on to the labor market. Shelter. Builders. Shelter is keeping inflation above the target right now. If we took this out of here, the shelter component, we would already have met the goal. We have already gone down to 2%, maybe a little bit lower. And the shelter component, it's a little wonky how they do this, but they're looking at really the rent levels out there in the market, and then the rent equivalent for people who own their homes. And what do we know about the rent market? What have we seen about the rent market over the past couple of years? It's been softening. We had a ton of units come online, flood of supply, and that's really softened the rent market. So there's a lag with this indicator. And so because of that, this red line is likely to keep trending down a bit, and that's going to help bring this black line, the goal, down to 2%. That's the hope. And the Federal Reserve has, they kept this Fed funds rate, hiked it up here. They kept it about 0. This is a whole nother discussion, but they kept it at 0 basically to keep our economy, keep our financial markets afloat, keep the money circulating. And they kept it there a really long time, and couple that with, the stimulus packages and things like that, we really did have an overheating of our economy, which led to that 9% inflation, which then led to this stair step where we are. Here's our first cut here, likely to see some more in the coming year. How's our job market going? Key trend here is that our job market's still growing, but it has slowed down a little bit. Here in Virginia, we are outpacing 2024. We have more jobs than we did a year ago. And what's interesting this year so far, now we only have data, midway through the year, a little more, we're actually outpacing our neighbors to the south of us, North Carolina, Georgia. And that was not the case this time last year. We were actually trailing them. So Virginia is actually in pretty good shape in terms of the job growth. Here we go, it's kind of like a baseline, just so you understand there's different size economies. I mean, our economy is smaller than North Carolina's. We have about 4.3 million jobs. They have about 5. Georgia, about 5 million. You can see South Carolina, Tennessee, a little smaller. But when we look at the actual change in jobs this year, again, this is through July, we've outpaced them. We've added about 57,000 jobs all across the Commonwealth, variety of sectors. We're going to get into that in a minute, but you can see we, 1.4%, more than North Carolina, who was, this time last year, was just kicking our butts in job growth. And so I think this really speaks to the strength of Virginia's economy. We just had another #1 ranking recently in CNBC, Best States for Business. And I think you're starting to see that play out, the resiliency of Virginia's economy. And it's important because, particularly for housing, because you guys hear the old adage, a home is where a job goes to sleep at night. So if you have job growth in your local market, in your state, you're going to have more housing demand, which is a positive thing for housing. Now, what job sectors are growing here? Largest so far has been healthcare this year. Healthcare is, we got about 9,100 additional healthcare jobs. That's how you read that chart there. It's in thousands, 9,100. You hear stories about hospitals not being able to keep staff. They got to fly in traveling nurses and things like this. It's because there's a huge demand for healthcare labor right now and social assistance. Admin and waste services, that represents, think about the folks who, facilities operations and things like that. Janitorial staff. as people start to go back into the office a little bit more, those types of jobs are becoming more in demand. So we've seen an increase in that. Professional and technical services, those are our office workers. They tend to be higher wage jobs. And then construction, we've seen an uptick in construction, and largely due to an uptick in single family construction here in Virginia. Now those four sectors, very important for our economy. They represent, this 4.3 million jobs we talked about. Those four sectors represent a third of all of them, just those four. So these are very large sectors, and they are sectors that are growing the fastest. They represent about half of all the jobs that we've added. So why is this important? Why do we even focus on this? One, job growth equals housing growth, housing demand. But two, it's important to understand the types of jobs that we have in our economy versus the types of housing and price points that we have available. And there's a growing mismatch in the wages of the jobs that are the job sectors that are growing and the housing that's available. And so this is something our team is keeping a close eye on. We're going to talk a little bit about it in the housing section. Where are the jobs taking place? Where are we adding jobs the fastest is in Charlottesville, 2.3% growth. But there's a lot of other smaller markets that have been adding jobs every month. Roanoke, here in Richmond, about 1,000 more jobs so far. Northern Virginia, 21,000, about 1.4% growth. So really all local markets so far have seen job growth. Now, our unemployment rate is quite low. It's much lower than the U.S. as a whole. But a large part of that is because our labor force participation is lower than it was before we had the pandemic. A lot of people left the labor force and have not come back. And so this has kept our unemployment rate somewhat artificially low. And it's projected to increase a little bit, but honestly, it would be a positive thing because that means that more people are coming back into the labor force. More gig workers are coming back in, and we need the labor, right? We have more jobs than we have workers right now. Speaking of job openings, one reason that the Federal Reserve has opted to go ahead and cut the rates is they've seen a weakening in the job market. You see this line represents the number of job openings in the U.S. Right now we're about 8 million-ish job openings, which has gone down considerably from where we were just even a year ago. And so that is a signal that businesses are right-sizing. They're cutting open positions that they have unfilled. They're pulling back their hiring from where they were just a couple years ago, and that's a signal that the labor market is cooling. Even with that cooling, though, it's still a tight labor market. How do we know it's tight? By this thing called the unemployed persons per job ratio. It's a mouthful. Basically, anything above that dashed line there, if the line's up here, labor market is loose. There's more jobs available, more workers than there are jobs. If it's down below here, below 1, that means we have more jobs than workers, which is what we have right now. Now, the good news is we're getting very close to an equilibrium where it's one job per worker that's looking for a job. And that is maximum employment. So we are heading in the right direction, but it's still tight labor market conditions. So what's been happening around Virginia? What's been happening with our population? We are still growing. We're still growing. We have more Virginians than we had last year, but it's at a pretty slow clip. And a little trivia for you guys, we're growing at the slowest rate we've grown as a state since the Civil War. Very slow growth. And what we've noticed is that there has been a kind of a reshuffling of where people are moving to within Virginia. And the migration patterns have accelerated since 2020, these patterns. So when we look at the overall, this is the total population change. This bar represents the latest year we have data, about 36,000 additional Virginians. In a state, we have about 8.7 million Virginians. So very, very slow growth. But keep in mind, this includes everything. This includes your natural population change, your births, your deaths. This includes international in-migration, out-migration, domestic. So everything together, we get about 36,000 additional Virginians. Where are they living? Where is this happening? Where is it growing? Where is it shrinking? Right now, it's growing sort of in central Virginia, kind of the coastal areas here. We got Fredericksburg is seeing a lot of growth. Winchester is our fastest growing metro area right now in Virginia. We've had it here in parts of the Shenandoah Valley, a little bit out here. And one pattern as emerges the exurbs, so the places right outside of kind of the outer ring suburbs of Hampton Roads, of Northern Virginia, of Richmond. People are moving to where they can afford to live. Surprise, surprise. They're moving to where they can afford a house. Survey after survey suggests people are still interested in home ownership because of the ability to generate and accumulate wealth through equity. But what's interesting is if you take out, this includes everything, births, deaths, everything. If you take out everything except the domestic migration, you get a different story. So this is kind of masking a trend that's happening sort of under the radar a little bit. Because notice how, this part of the state is pretty much crimson red, losing population, Shenandoah Valley. That's because that population there is older. It's an older population. So they have more deaths than they have births. So a lot of their shrinking population is from natural change. But if you look at only migration, only domestic migration, you see a different story. You see people are moving to the rural parts of Virginia. Yes, we're still seeing a lot of growth in sort of the suburbs, the outer suburbs, but big swaths of the state are gaining population through migration, through domestic migration. And that's important. And I believe it's largely driven by a couple things. One, housing costs. They're going where they can find housing. Two, hybrid work, remote work, where you can commute a couple days a week maybe, a few days a week to a job center. People are willing to take that jump. And then three, people are just looking for more space, right? So maybe they're changing their job. Maybe they're looking for a new job. A lot of people are moving from the Northeast, from California, settling in places in Virginia because we have lower taxes. We have, in many cases, lower housing costs. So really this has been a trend that we've been seeing, but it was accelerated. It's really accelerated over the past few years. And I want your eyes to just jump on these two here. This shows 2014 to 17. You can see Northern Virginia. Really, most of the population growth was in Northern Virginia. Then that started to slow down in 2017 to 2020. You can see Richmond's kind of been a stair step the whole time, smaller metros. But then the whole thing flipped starting with 2020. We saw an out-migration from Northern Virginia, big in-migration to Richmond, and a really noticeable change in in-migration to rural parts of Virginia. Have you guys heard the phrase, the rural renaissance? You guys hearing that out there in the field? It's happening. There's been a lot more people are moving to places in rural Virginia. Like we said, the job flexibility, the housing availability, and also broadband is another one I forgot to mention. We've seen expansion of the broadband network all over the state, and that is driving some of this as well. Let's pivot now to the housing market before we wrap it up with the forecast. So when we talk about the housing market, I'm talking about the for-sale market. The realtors are looking at the listings out on the MLS every single day, and it's been a relatively disappointing 2024 out there. We've seen a slower spring market than we typically would see, slower summer market, and slower than people were anticipating. And that is because mortgage rates. Mortgage rates have hovered upper 6, low 7s, almost the entirety of 2024. Now we have recently, in August, we started to see that improve. and now they're sitting, low 6%. But a majority of the 2024 market so far, those rates have been pretty pesky. They've been stubbornly high, which has kept market activity constrained. But over time, if the rates dip, we have enough demand out there that it's probably going to usher in more activity. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at where we are with the rates. As of last week, about 6.09, which is the lowest that it's been in quite some time. But what's important about these rates is not just the number of where they are, but really there's a psychological element to this when you're talking about buyers and sellers, right? There is a financial component, obviously, but there's also a psychological one. So let's walk through some sequences here. We had, really low rates here. About 2021 is when it started to pivot. But really from 2017 to 2021, the average rate was below 4%. So really the expectations were, okay, this is the rate I'm looking at. This is what it's going to be when they're pricing out the home that they want to find. And then we had the rates double in less than a year. So basically, this is sort of the jolt phase. This is the segment where people were like, wait a minute, I was just looking at homes a few months ago, and now you're telling me I'm not approved for that loan because I can't afford it, because the interest rate is that much higher. So it really did throw a wrench into the entire market, psychologically as well as financially. Then we have sort of the third phase, which is, after it doubled, there was sort of this hope or sort of hesitation out in the market that the rates were going to improve. And they did the opposite. They kept going up to the point where we reached our basically 2-decade peak, almost hitting 8%. That brings me to the last phase, which I am describing as sort of the acceptance, the recalibration phase of the buyers and sellers out there. And that's the realization that, okay, this is the level of rates that we're going to have. There might be some improvements, but going back to those 3-4% rates is not realistic. And so they've adjusted their budgets, they've adjusted their search criteria on the homes, they've redone their math, they've redone their loan approvals. And so we're going to start to see, as the rates improve, folks getting off the sideline because of this sort of segment of, oh my God, what's going on? Surely it's going to get better. Maybe not. Okay, this is the reality. This is where we are. Now, there is one complicating factor here, and that's homeowners that have very low interest rates, very low interest rates. Have you guys heard the lock-in effect, the golden handcuffs, all that? It's certainly a problem, and it's impeding our supply out in the market. This yellow line are the homeowners. This is all mortgages in Virginia. As of Q1, it's a little bit delayed, the data. 4% is the average interest rate that folks have. You go out in the market. Now keep in mind, this is a quarterly average, so it's lower than that now, but 7%, see even 6%. So this gap is starting to narrow. And as that gap narrows, it's going to become more enticing for sellers, move-up buyers, to list their homes, thus creating an influx of inventory, which we really need. But irregardless of where the rates are, it's very important because life continues to go on. And life events, major life events that trigger home buying and selling decisions are still happening irregardless of where mortgage rates are. People are downsizing. They're entering retirement. Millions more are turning 65 every year. We got a lot of job switches right now. It's very frothy out there. People are moving around. There's a lot more jobs than there are workers, so you can be selective. You can move to a new locality. We got a lot of kids being born. The millennials are having a lot of babies. There are marriages, there are deaths. The point is there's a lot of life events that trigger a home sale or purchase. And this is still going to happen, so it's over time, from those really low rates, over time, that lock-in effect is likely to loosen which will add supply to the market. So how is our market going in terms of the inventory? This is a key trend here, and this is new. This is new for this year. We have started to see more listings come on the market, finally. After years and years of declines and shrinking, we're actually seeing improvements, but we're not out of the woods yet. It's still very much a supply-demand imbalance out there in the market. So this shows our active listings that are on an MLS in Virginia. We get this data every month. And we got about 19,000 listings as of into August. Like we said, we got 7 million folks in Virginia with under 20,000 active listings out there. It's just really unhealthy level. And it hasn't, it's improved quite a bit. You can see last year we were really down kind of at hopefully the trough. But just from a few years ago, you can see it's really gone down significantly. And this is one of the reasons why we're seeing very competitive market conditions. This is one of the reasons why we're seeing, and I hear this from our members, realtor members all the time, my clients are giving up on the for sale market and they're going to new construction. That's the only way they can find an option for their household that's going to meet their needs. So when we look around the state, though, we have seen more new listings, which indicates to me that idea that the lock-in effect is starting to loosen. Almost 80%, about 80%, all the local markets in the state have had more new listings come online. That was not the case last year. When we ask our members every month, we survey them, what is the most common reason that your seller clients are listing their homes? And consistently, every month, the top reason is this one right here. People are relocating outside of Virginia. That's concerning to me. That speaks to our housing affordability crunch, and families and folks are moving to where they can afford a home. There's also a lot of downsizing happening, about another fifth of sellers for downsizers, and then we also have some move-up buyers in there as well. But still, overall, tight inventory conditions. Even with all those new listings, we only have 2.3 months of supply. That means if you were to just imagine it like a hose, if you just turned off the hose, the water stopped flowing, and the water is our listings. All the listings that are out there would be sold in 2.3 months. There would be zero. So that reflects a very tight market. That reflects a seller's market. The conditions favor sellers. 3 to 6 months, more balanced. Really, anything over 6, you're really looking at a buyer's market. But we are very much in a seller's market here in Virginia. About 50% have less than 3 months of supply. The area is denoted there in beige or brown. Those are markets where pretty much a seller's market conditions. All right, builders, so what's going on? We have not kept up. We have not kept up with our peer states in terms of new construction permitting. Here in Virginia, we're the dark, it's a little hard to see it there probably in the back, but we're this dark line here. And we know they're larger states. We just saw their economies are much larger, but North Carolina, Georgia, they've gone crazy compared to where we are. And really since the Great Recession here, Virginia has been relatively flat growth on permitting compared to other places in the Southeast. And what's interesting to me is that we saw Tennessee and South Carolina, smaller states than we are, but they are now outpacing us as well. This started about 2014. So yes, we do have sellers sitting in their homes. Yes, we do have a lot of baby boomers who are not downsizing. They're keeping their larger home for a variety of reasons. But we're also underproducing. We're underproducing housing. All of these things combined is really creating that tight inventory environment that we're grappling with, and we're starting to see it play out in the home pricing trends, which we're going to get to next. So where is it? We have seen more, but it's a little bit less than our neighboring states. Most of the single-family permitting so far, and this is probably not a shocker for anybody in this industry here, it's really been in the smaller metros, the Harrisonburgs, your Lynchburgs, your Roanoaks, This is where we're seeing a ramp up in single-family and townhome construction, and multifamily, on the other hand, has slowed down quite a bit. There are some pockets where we're still seeing, one or two buildings, but really your big metro, big multifamily markets, Hampton Roads, Northern Virginia, Richmond, pretty big slowdown this year compared to last year. So overall, the market, like I said, it's been relatively sluggish, slow in spring. We are hoping that it gets better next year, and we're going to talk about that in the outlook. But so far, it's been pretty anemic. We've had about 70,000 sales, and this is closed sales in Virginia. And you can see this is year-to-date August. Typically, by this time frame, we would have above 80,000. So we're really slowed down to near decade lows. Last year was a decade low. We're a little above last year, about 60% or so, but you can see where 60% of local markets have had an uptick. But really it is your outer suburbs, places in South Side is expanding quite a bit, a lot of job growth down there. And pending sales, this is sort of a leading indicator. When we see a pending sale, it means that the home is under contract. We were hemorrhaging here for a good couple years, but really just pretty flat pending sale growth so far, and that is due to the low supply and the elevated mortgage rates and elevated home prices. So let's talk about home pricing, because this is very important when we talk about demand. So they're still climbing at a clip there. And it's really because we have very strong demand in our market. We have very strong demand. We have, generationally, you have your baby boomers and your millennials, our two largest generations, are in the life stage where a lot of housing decisions are made, whether it be downsizing, whether it be moving up, whether it be buying your first home. Couple that with our tight inventory, and this is what you get. You get home prices climbing. And so far, we've had about 5.1% increase in our median sales price. This is statewide. In a typical year, we would have maybe 2 to 3%. And so we've been outpacing that for quite some time. But we had our boom years here when the interest rate was very low. But you can see really 2 to 3% is kind of a more typical. We have not gotten anywhere near that, even though we've had much slower market conditions. Well, I think that the first statement is leading to the second statement. The rising prices it's a byproduct of rising prices, worsening affordability. But we're going to talk through where we're seeing that the worst and where we're seeing there are pockets where it is relatively affordable in Virginia. And so we're going to look through that here on the next couple slides. Speaking of which, here we are. So who's getting priced out? Who's getting priced out of our markets? Our team did a study on income levels of key market segments and the price points that are out there in our regional markets. This takes into account current pricing, relatively current interest rates. It takes into account local tax rates, because we know there's a big fluctuation by location. And we took a look at 25 to 44-year-olds. Now, these are essentially the entire millennial generation. A few Gen Zers, the oldest Gen Zers are in there. Maybe the youngest Gen Xers are in there. But really, it's the millennials who are in their prime home buying years. And we found that really almost every metro area, millennials are likely having a hard time entering the market. Now, it's certainly worse in the higher cost markets, places like Northern Virginia, where it requires about a $200,000 annual salary, household, so it could be two workers. Household salary, about $200,000, will afford the median priced home in Northern Virginia. But when we go out and look at the data on this key segment of the market, this is the average household income is about $75,000 short of the median priced home. Now, we know it's not that simplistic, right? There's going to be different salaries, there's going to be different home demand, But when the median price is not aligning with the median home price, then you're likely seeing a lot of folks having trouble making it work, making the numbers work. You go around Charlottesville, the second least affordable. About $48,000 difference there in the income levels versus the home prices. Get down to Richmond, Harrisonburg, you're talking in the 30s. So when we look at it kind of a heat map, same calculations in a heat map by city and county, anything that is yellow or green is a market where it is likely relatively affordable based on the income levels that these 25 to 44-year-old buyers have. So these are your pockets of affordability, and they really do align with the migration patterns that we're seeing. You know, we've seen an uptick in migration here in the Roanoke Valley, in part of the South Side region. And so I think that this really speaks to, when we talk about competitiveness of our state, our number one CNBC ranking there for business, a big portion of that is our labor pool. We have a very highly educated labor force when you peel back the components of that ranking. And if these 25 to 44-year-olds are having trouble just entering the housing market in their own local communities, we run the risk of them moving. And we have started to see that in the data, where we're seeing Northern Virginia folks jumping over Richmond and going to Raleigh, going further south. So this is something that we got to keep an eye on, and it is directly related to housing supply. If we had more housing supply, the affordability issues would be less. Last key point, then we're going to wrap it up with some questions. Competitive market conditions exist. Even though it is a very slow market, it is still very competitive. Anybody out there in the housing market right now? I mean, people are putting in multiple offers still. People are still waiving inspections, believe it or not. Even though we have such a slow pace of sales. And but if mortgage rates improve, even marginally, because folks are very price sensitive right now, we could see a flood of new people coming in, or people who had push pause to push play again. And so we're actually going to see, we could see competitive conditions worsen, intensify, if those rates dip. How do we measure competitiveness? Is by looking at what sellers are getting versus what they're asking. And on average, they're getting right around their asking price. This is as of August. It's about 99.8%. You can see earlier in the year, they're getting above asking. I mean, in these years, they're getting way above asking. But this signals to me that it's still competitive. If we see sellers start to get below their asking, then that would signal a cooling conditions in the market, a lot less buyers out there, and a lot less sales activity. But right now, we have a lot of buyers for a little amount of homes. And it's happening in most places. I mean, about 30% of the markets, the sellers are getting above their asking price. And then we also measure it by days on market. And, homes are selling in about 12 days here in Virginia. There's going to be a lot of variability depending on which market you're in. Places up in Northern Virginia, it's like 5 days. Here in Richmond, it's like 6. But from where we were, much faster transaction time, and that, again, is due to the fundamental imbalance that we have with the demand that's out there versus the homes that are available. All right, let's do a forecast here, and then we'll open up to questions, and then I'm thirsty. I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready for happy hour. So we got our job growth. We're on track, 2024, about 1.9% increase in our job base, which is exceeding last year. Next year, though, we are projecting a little bit of a slowdown. And this is aligning with kind of national trends. We've seen some cooling in the labor market. Yes, we're outpacing last year. Yes, we're outpacing some of our states. But conditions are such that we're probably not going to have as robust job growth here in Virginia next year. But still positive. Still 1.2%. In terms of our unemployment, we're on track for about a 2.8% unemployment rate here in 2024, very, very low, much lower than the US. But as we kind of talked about before, as more people enter the labor market, we're likely to see that increase. So next year, this time, we're probably looking at low 3% for unemployment, which is actually a positive thing when you consider how tight the labor market is. Now, let's go to housing. Home sales this year been quite sluggish, about 2.9% is what we're projecting for 2024. Next year, though, based on two factors. One, mortgage rates have improved. Now, they are unlikely to fall off a cliff. You know, we know that the market's priced in those Fed fund rate cuts already. But if you were to draw a trend line, those rates are likely to drift. Now, they're going to fluctuate week to week, day to day, but the trend line for next year is drifting down. That will fuel demand. And then also, we've seen an improvement in the supply. That will also facilitate more sales. So we're projecting about 9.8% increase. This is about 9,600 additional sales here in Virginia. Home prices, we talked about this. We're about at a 5% growth rate. We're projecting that to be about the annual average when 2024 is in the rear view. And looking at next year, still stronger than average, but a little bit of a moderation there. And that's largely due to the increase in supply, the additional listings that we project to come online. Housing starts. Now, this includes everything, guys. This includes your single family, your multifamily, townhome construction. And so far this year, we've been below last year, and this has all been because of multifamily construction permitting. Single family permitting is up. But because multifamily permitting is such a large share of the number of units, it brings down the total numbers there. But next year, we're actually projecting a bit of an increase, and largely due to those improving interest rates, very strong demand in the market, and again, all of that being driven by single-family construction. We're still projecting a downturn in multifamily permitting for 2025. And lastly, everyone's favorite, impossible to predict, but 6.1% is what we're looking at. You know, we actually saw some evidence that the rates inched up a little bit after the cut, and that's because the bond markets have already priced these things in. So we're likely to see them hover around the low sixes, but then by the end of next year, there's going to be quite a few more cuts coming. Into next year, we could see below 6% towards the end of the year, and that I think would be welcome news to a lot of buyers and sellers out there, and hopefully abate some of that affordability concern and trying to make those monthly payments work. That's what we got. We're here for, I'll be around for after this if you guys have any questions or right now. But feel free to email me at this email address. My team monitors this box. We'd be happy to connect and chat more. But thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.